Michel, thank you so much for joining us and for your willingness to be our first person today. And I know with all that you have to share with us, we'll just get started right away if that's okay with you. Let me put that down. Michel, you were just turning 11 when the Nazis overran Poland in September 1939. The war came to you and your family in Belgium in the spring of 1940, so less than a year later. Before you tell us about your journey to safety in the U.S., start first by sharing with us a bit about your family, your community, and yourself in those early years before the war.
Well, I went to school. My first language was Russian because my parents came from Ukraine. And then when I got out of the house, I learned French. And my schooling was basically French until the war started. Mm-hmm. I attended school as much as I could. Sometimes I didn't. I played hooky once in a while. Mm-hmm. Got to be enjoyable because I used to visit the city, Brussels, went all over. And listened to the radio. That was a new device. Mm-hmm. Radio was new, fairly new back then. And I read some, but nothing exciting.
Tell us about your siblings.
My sister was 4 years older than I. We had little in common at the time, except our parents. My brother was closer. He used to advise me about everything. Mm-hmm. He talked a lot about sports like Tour de France, bicycle race, and soccer. And the best teams, of course, were from Brussels. Mm-hmm. And the best bike riders were Belgium. Mm-hmm. And he also told me about a lot of things. We went to the beach. We spent some summers on the coast chasing jellyfish occasionally. Did everything that kids do.
You had a sister that passed away tragically very young, right?
Yeah, I hardly remember that one. Yeah. I was an infant.
Your father had a printing business where he printed his newspapers. I think, if I remember right, you used to actually, even though you were young, you did some work in the printing plant.
Yeah, well, my father, he had to learn a new language to work there, and he was able to eventually succeed in getting the printing plant, and I tried to get in there and do what I can.
Mm-hmm. As a young boy.
As a young boy.
Yeah. Michel, Germany invaded Poland September 1st, 1939. You remember pretty vividly the next day, September 2nd.
I remember the first day we were in the market. Mm-hmm. My mother wanted to buy me shoes. I heard the next day France and England gave an ultimatum to Germany, and the following day the war started.
So by the 3rd, England and France had declared war on Germany, right?
And that came into Belgium, and we greeted them by singing Tipperary and all stuff, and it was quite a good day.
Michel, what can you tell us about the circumstances in which your family found itself when the Germans attacked Belgium in May of 1940, and what led to the family's decision to flee for France?
Well, my father was basically self-educated to a large extent, and he had read the Mein Kampf, and he believed what Hitler had written. Mm-hmm. And
he took him seriously.
He took him seriously. And my parents also experienced the Russian Revolution. Mm-hmm. And my father was an anti-fascist, and he wrote a lot about coming of Hitler.
In his newspaper.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that when the Germans came, when they attacked, my father felt he had a price on his head. Mm-hmm. And we decided to leave as soon as possible.
How did you get out?
Well, the war in Belgium started May 10th when the German bombed Brussels,
Which is where you were.
which we were in. I remember hearing it, hearing the bombs. We immediately left. We took whatever we could on our backs and walked over to the railroad station and waited to get in because it was packed. We finally
So thousands of others were trying to do the same thing, right?
we finally got in, and we wanted to take the next train out to the coast to go to England. We missed the train, we missed the boat, gratefully, because that ship was sunk. So we waited for the next train, which was supposed to stop in Mons, about half hour away from Brussels. When we got there, the city was practically wiped out from the bombs. 2 nuns were arrested.
2 nuns.
2 nuns. Well, they were dressed as nuns, but they were German paratroopers. But something, and they were discovered. But that delayed everything, and we were not allowed to get off the train. The train started again, and for the next 7 days, 7 nights, we went on to southern France. We were fed by the French people wherever we stopped. We were strafed a few times. Strafing means German planes machine gunning the train.
And you remember that?
I well remember it.
Yeah.
Many people, the train stopped a few times and people got off. Some of them did not get back. My father pushed us, the kids, under the seat in the train.
When the planes were being
When the
strafed?
planes were coming, because he felt it would be safer than being outside. And then eventually we stopped at about 50 miles south of Toulouse, big city in southern France.
And what did you do once you stopped there?
We were taken in by the local people. We were settled in vacant apartments with a couple of bunks and a few other residents that we stepped on occasionally. Mice.
Mice.
And we stayed there for a while until France signed an armistice with the Germans. That's every diplomat left. Said the French government was established in Vichy with Monsieur Pétain, who was the hero of World War I in Verdun, but he was also an the Nuremberg laws that the Germans had, Monsieur Pétain applied with even greater vigor than the Germans, actually.
In France.
In France.
So with the capitulation of the French, France was in a sense divided into 2. The Germans occupied.
The coast, the western coast, was occupied by German troops. The other part was not occupied by troops, but they had a lot of German civilians.
And that's what we call Vichy France. And so that's where you.
Vichy France was a collaboration
Yep.
country with Germany.
And that's where you were headed.
And that's where we were. My father went to Vichy to see if he could secure passport for my mother. That passport had elapsed, and he couldn't do it. And he felt that because if he had a price on his head, he had the papers to be able to go, and he went directly to Portugal, where he thought he might have a better chance. Because in Vichy, all the diplomats had gone, and there was nobody to work on the papers.
You were, while you were in Toulouse, I believe French gendarmes took you to a detention camp.
Not quite.
Not quite?
That was later on.
Okay.
So he went, and then we went to a farm.
Okay.
friends that I had known from Ukraine. We stayed there for a little while, and then my mother decided, she heard that there might have been a diplomat, maybe in Marseille. Also, we were Persian by that time because when my father escaped from Siberia, he found refuge in Persia, and he became a Persian citizen. So we were a little safer than being just Russian or whatever it was back then.
And Persia, which we know as Iran today.
Right.
So your father had Persian citizenship, and he was trying to get to the Persian embassy, wasn't he, to get papers?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we went to Marseille, and we kept hiding there. And just down there from the railroad station, which a little place that I call the slums.
Before you get to that, at what point did you end up in the detention camp?
That was later.
That comes later, okay.
Yeah.
When did your father leave? He left before
He
you
left
got to...
He left in June 1940.
Before you got to Marseille.
Before
right?
we got to Marseille.
How did he get out?
He had the documents, he had his passport.
Okay, but your mom did not.
My mother, that passport had lapsed.
Okay, and so he went...
And we were, all the kids were on my mother's passport.
And where did your father go?
He went to Portugal.
He went to Portugal.
To Lisbon. Mm-hmm. We were in Marseille and we were hiding there. So I started to say in the slums.
Your time in Marseille, I know you've described to me as that for you personally, as a young boy, that was a really important place and time for you. It forced you to grow up very quickly. Here you are in Marseille with your mom and your brother and sister and you, and as you said, you moved into what's essentially the slums of Marseille. Tell us what that was like.
It was safe for us because the cops, police did not want to go there. It was not safe for the police.
Mm-hmm. It was just that rough?
It was that rough. Mm-hmm. It was about as diverse as could be. We had opium smoking Chinese across the yard from us, Corsicans, Italians, Arabs, everything was there. Mm-hmm. And we were safe. I could communicate with all of them. But by that time I had lost my Belgian accent and my Toulouse accent, and I acquired the Marseille accent, which was unique. So I was basically living as a Frenchman there.
What was your living environment like? What were the circumstances in which you found yourselves living day to day?
It was a small room.
With 4 of you in it?
With 4 of us in it. We had an alcohol stove, which we cooked occasionally. I made friends with other kids, mostly with kids whose parents were involved with foods, like restaurant owners or chefs, and food became scarce at the time. Everything was rations. Everything from eggs to milk and that was in short demand. Queues for everything. When the store had something that would sell it, then people would still stand in line, could not get, let's say, milk or meat or whatever. So it was hard to get.
You've shared with me that your mother, in order to be able to feed her kids, be able to pay the rent and do what she needed to do, had to get very creative and enter the black market.
Right.
Tell us about her black market skills.
Well, because our papers elapsed, so we became basically undocumented aliens. And that means that we could not get ration coupons. So in order to survive, she went into business called black marketing. And penalty was fatal. If you were caught, that was it.
Shot on the spot.
Well, I show a slide with a noose It said black market is a crime against community. But she did pretty well. She was able to get things at a low price, relatively low price, and sell it for a better price. Things like cigarettes, candies, chocolates, not so much necessities, but luxury items.
That she used to sell to, that's what she was,
good price.
that's what she was selling.
And she did pretty well.
And you'll tell us more about that, I think, in a little bit, about how well she did do. Even though you didn't know this at the time, I believe your brother Willie was arrested during that time.
Early on, there was a parade of French who wanted to follow de Gaulle. De Gaulle escaped to England to keep fighting for the French. And he was in that parade and he was arrested by the French police. But I guess I did not examine him too closely because he was released the next day. I didn't even know that.
You, I'm not pronouncing this right, but you've described to me the authorities would set up these essentially people traps or raffles. Tell us about that.
Raffles, where the police would seal both ends of the street and pick up everybody inside the street.
So everybody's trapped in there.
Everybody's trapped in that, and if that cannot prove their or justify their existence there, they would be taken away.
And you escaped a couple of those raffles.
I escaped several of them.
And how were you able to do that?
Well, the house was so connected that I was able to go from house to house until I got to a free street.
So in other words, because you, as you had said earlier, you sort of got to know the neighborhood and the folks, and you knew all the nooks and crannies, and were able to find your way out of these raffles.
But I also made friends with other kids who knew the area better.
So follow them to get out.
And I would go with them.
You've hinted in the past, but I think you know it's coming. I always ask you about some of what you called the nefarious activities you engaged in. So,
well, I had one particular friend who called himself Café au lait. His father was from Cameroon. He was black. His mother was Danish. He was Café au lait. And we did everything together. He taught me how to swim, how to skate, how to ride, how to steal. And stealing was important because we needed food. We went fishing. We did some spear fishing, and that came in handy. We also had he had a little kayak that we were able to use. And that enabled us to go along the coast and see what was going on. And some of the activities that ensued, I keep secret.
okay. But you were
Even my kids don't know about that.
okay. Someday I'm going to pry them out of you. At some point, even though you felt safe hidden in this area that the authorities wouldn't typically come into, your mother was able to allow you all to survive through her black market skills, plus what you and your siblings did. But at some point, your mother decided it was necessary to get out of Marseille, in fact, get out of France entirely and go to Spain.
Right. So we stayed there for 2 seasons. I used to go to my friend's house, Raphael. He lived by the port. I used to spend my time in bookshops around there. But the beach was in the season. I used to go there every day, and I did gymnastics and learned how to swim and everything. But then in November 1942. the Allied forces, the Americans mainly, invaded North Africa. And when that happened, the German troops came down into Marseille. And that was very scary. I felt particularly scared because the marching of those troops on the main drag where you saw my picture there was very scary. Those boots are very noisy and thunderous, and I was really scared then.
So what had been unoccupied France now was fully occupied by the Germans.
Fully occupied by the troops. And my mother decided this is the time to get out of here. She was able to buy forged papers to be able to get out. My sister had polio, and the paper that she got said that she had to go to the mountains to get fresh air to help. So we got on the train as soon as we could. We had to connect to Toulouse to get another train to go to the Spanish border. That train happened to be a German troop train. And well, I had no problems with my siblings because we talked, but my mother could not speak French. She spoke Yiddish and Russian.
So you're on the train with German troops.
We were on the train with the soldiers sitting across from us with their weapons. And then my mother wanted to join, and while we were talking, she felt that maybe she didn't feel right about not saying anything, so she started signing as if she were deaf-mute.
But faking it.
Fainting it.
Yeah.
And we caught on and we responded in kind. And we had no problem. We got to the Spanish border. It was scary.
I would think that was very scary.
We got to the border, we stopped at an inn, we had a nice meal. The food was better than we had before. Then we were approached that same evening we were approached by two French gendarmes, national police, offering to take us into Spain for a small fee. And the small fee was $10,000 per person, $40,000 in 1942. You mentioned that. I think I looked it up recently, about a year ago, about how much it would be worth today. Too many zeros.
Yeah, infinitely more.
My sister was the translator, and she said, "Why we go into Spain? We're French." But eventually, my mother relented, and that took us over.
So stop for just a moment. $40,000, an immense sum of money in that time. This takes us back to our conversation about your mother's black market skills.
Very rewarding.
Yes, very profitable. So she had made that kind of money, black marketing.
Right.
And that bought your opportunity
Right.
to go. And I would think that the risk, you didn't know these gendarmes were for real. You didn't know that they were really going to take you, or did you? I mean, it could have been a
I found out later on that many of those gendarmes would take the money and then betray them.
And then betray them.
And turn them back to either the French police or the
Nazis,
Germans. I don't remember any German police, but the troops were there.
So you were really lucky. These guys honored that and helped.
My brother-in-law encountered troops, police on the border, and I've heard from others who were betrayed.
So you crossed the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain.
We started at sundown, and we took whatever we could, especially with energy food, sugars, candies, whatever, to sustain because November 1942 is still cold, even in southern France, especially going up over mountains
Right.
that scale up to over 7,000 feet.
And I've read that there are very few easily passable routes over the Pyrenees, and so there's trails and things like that you were following.
But they did a good job.
They did a good job.
We heard dogs and we heard some things, but we never encountered any untoward incidents.
One of the, I have to bring this up. You had essentially all you could take was what you could carry, and it had to be relatively light because of this strike. Except for something you brought with you.
As I mentioned, I used to go to bookshops and things, and I used to love to read, so I got myself a big French dictionary, which I attached to my belt and walked over the mountains with it.
Big dictionary.
I was crazy, what can I say?
Yeah. So, fortunately, you made it. The four of you got into Spain. Then what happens?
We were stopped at an inn, and they left. We paid them, and the gendarme left. And we slept through noon, and then the inn was closed. The chairs were stacked on top of the tables. Then we were advised to take two more Spanish guides to take us into the country, into the city. And we got them, but instead of going through the woods, I decided to follow the railroad tracks. After all, that's the most direct way to get into town. Mm-hmm. But it's also the easiest way to be spotted. Mm-hmm. And so we were in a very short time, within an hour or two. We were arrested. We were taken to another restaurant that fed us that evening and then sent everybody to jail. Mother and sister in one jail, my brother in another one, and I was too young for jail, so they sent me to an orphanage.
So you're separated now from your family.
We were separated. And I stayed in that orphanage for several days, mm-hmm. going to Mass every day, mm-hmm. every morning at 6 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And then at one time, there was a priest who came and took all the refugee kids. I was not the only one. And he took us around town to show us, tell us a little bit about Spanish history in the province of Catalunya, where we were. From there, my brother was shipped to a concentration camp in Spain. Spanish concentration camp from the Civil War. Spain had just experienced the Civil War just 3 years or so before that.
And at this time, Franco was still the dictator.
And Franco was a dictator, a friend of Hitler.
Friend of Hitler.
And Mussolini. And had recently opened the borders to refugees, so we were able to get in. At one time, they were sent back to France, but we were able to stay in there.
When did your mother and your sister get released, and when did you reunite with your mother and your sister?
I don't remember just how long, 2, 3, 4 weeks, I don't know. Then the American Rescue Service helped us, mainly the Joint Committee, Jewish American Service, and we were released and we were sent to another town, Caldas de Malavella, which was an old Roman bath town that set up several hotels for refugees, and that provided everything there.
In Spain was, even though Franco was a friend of Hitler and Mussolini, it was a neutral country.
It was theoretically
neutral, yeah.
But we were there for a while. Food was pretty good, but also that province of Catalunya was the one that resisted Franco most, and he took his revenge on that province. And it still resounds today when we talk about wanting to separate from the country.
And your mother, of course, still needed to get proper documentation.
Well, she wasn't too worried at the time. We worried, of course, illegal immigrants,
Right.
but the Joint Committee helped refugees in Spain.
Did she still try to get in touch with the Persian authorities?
I don't know, but I did.
You did, okay.
I got in touch with the British embassy and consulate because Persia was a British protectorate. So he came to visit one time and left me a few pesetas, the currency, and that's it. He said he can't do anything for me.
I was struck by an image you shared with me in Barcelona of the U.S. Embassy side by side with the German Embassy with the stars and stripes flying.
From that place, we were sent to Barcelona to live there with the families, and that would subsidize us. But as I walked around, Barcelona is the biggest city in Spain. I was struck, and I don't know the word is struck, but having the German consulate right next to the American
With the
consulate,
swastika flag flying.
with both flags flying next to each other practically. At that time, I was not too interested in that. We used to go mainly to the British consulate because it was more open to us. And of course, we listened to Churchill speeches exhorting to fight on.
Your mother was able to make arrangements for you to leave. Tell us.
My mother heard that there was that agency was trying to save children.
Okay.
By that time, way before that, 1939, Britain had a program to save children with a kinder transport. 10,000 children. 10,000 children from Germany and Austria were able to go to Great Britain. But here, where the American government did not allow any refugees practically. The immigration was closed. America was still on the depression in a way. And refugees were not welcome. They were afraid for jobs to be taken away or whatever. But this agency tried to save children. Eventually, they were able to save about 1,600 kids.
1,600 kids.
And my mother signed me up. We had to be under 16.
Which meant that your brother and sister
My brother and sister did not qualify.
did not qualify. Okay.
My brother was 3 years older, my sister 4 years older. So she signed me up, we said goodbye. I don't remember crying, but that must have been. And took the train, picked up a few more kids in Madrid. And from Madrid, we went on to Portugal.
Do you remember saying goodbye to your mother and your brother and sister?
Yes.
Well-
That was a pretty sad day.
I bet that was a really sad day.
We never knew whether we'd see each other again. My sister had fallen in love with somebody that she had met in Marseille, who came from Palestine, and he wanted to go back. And he made his way to Spain also, and she again saw him in Spain. So when I went to Portugal, my father greeted me at when I got off the train, and he said, "Oh, gee, now you are a man. Now you can." And he offered me a cigarette. I was 14.
You're a man now.
Well, in our religion, 13 is when we become men. And I stayed with him for a few days. He was allowed to do that because he was also, refugees in Portugal was sent to in a small town a little north of Lisbon. But he was able to come to Lisbon to greet me and stay with him until I had to leave.
So when you left, you were saying yet another goodbye, this time to your father. Yeah.
But I also brought some things that my mother had baked.
For your
Gift
dad?
to my dad. Cookies. And I used to say those cookies, if it fell on your toes, would probably bake them. But it was very good. But my father, when he opened that box, he kissed each cookie first.
Michel, I wanted to ask you, when your father left France and you and your siblings and your mom were in Marseille, were they in contact with each other?
We corresponded.
You corresponded. You were able to do that.
A lot of the letters were blacked out. Some censor was very effective. You know, they blacked out anything that revealed anything.
Right.
But we kept in touch, so we knew where he was.
So now you're about to leave Portugal and come to the United States. You said goodbye to your father. We're in the middle of war. There was risks involved in taking a ship to the United States. Tell us about that trip.
Well, that was a Portuguese ship.
Okay.
At neutral.
A neutral ship. Okay.
And I think that was respected by both sides. But from Lisbon, we went to Porto to pick up a load of cork, which was export to Portugal, and wine. And we went on to Azores, where we made a stop. And from there, we went on to Philadelphia. But on the way, we had made a stop, and I didn't know what. We were told to stay below because the stop was made by a U-boat. German submarine stopped us. And for about an hour or so, we were delayed, but then it went on. And the only thing that I learned after that, or was told, is that one of the cooks had disappeared. And that was it.
But you don't know anything more about it than that.
I don't know anything else about it.
So the submarine then takes off and leaves.
I assume so.
Yep. And so you make it to the U.S.
And we made to Philadelphia, and then I see all these airplanes and nettings and dirigibles in the sky. I didn't think it was to greet us refugees. It was wartime. We were immediately put on the train, and the train went directly from Philadelphia to a place called the Bronx. Bronx? Never heard of it. Later on, I heard about the Bronx bomber, and that was Joe Louis. But otherwise, then I found out it was also a place where they played baseball.
Michel, one of the other things that you had hung on to besides your dictionary was a stamp collection. And that was important to you. And when you got to Philadelphia, what happened to your stamp collection?
Oh, the customs confiscated it.
After you'd carried it with you all that time.
Well, I didn't even think about it, but they confiscated it. I think it was returned to me about 4 years later. Maybe every stamp was examined under a microscope.
Why was it confiscated, do you think? Do you have any idea?
Well, later on, through the movies, I found that many of the secrets were transmitted through stamps.
So the possibility of spies.
So I assumed that this was checked for... Even 14-year-olds can be spies, I guess. I don't know.
So you're now safely in the United States. Where do you end up?
In the Bronx.
In the Bronx, I know, but living where?
From the in the Bronx, I had a cousin. My father had an uncle in New York, and my niece, a cousin, came to visit me and wanted to impress me with the new country that I came to. She was 25 days older than my sister. She came with a big brimmed straw hat and a big French-English dictionary. And she took me to a place called Radio City Music Hall. She wanted to impress me. She said, "This is America." Well, the Rockettes were nice, but it was just another show. And then she started trying to communicate with me. She would page through the dictionary, point to a word and say, "Ha-ha, right here." Eventually she said, "Der is Mamelution, do you speak Yiddish?" I said, "Well, no, at home we spoke Russian." The diversity in my family is that my parents were born in Russia, my siblings in Persia, I was born in Belgium. My parents spoke Yiddish to each other, they spoke Russian to the kids, and we kids spoke French. So that's diversity.
How quickly did you learn English?
That comes,
Okay.
well, I'll come to that, but then I said, I know enough Yiddish to be able to understand, because after living with my parents for so many years, you pick up a few things. So she does the dictionary aside, and
Now you could communicate.
yeah.
In the time we have...
And then she, a few days later, I went to live with them. And that was for a few months until they could not afford me. And that turned me over to the foster home system in New York. And I became a foster child. That September, that took me to high school.
While you were still in the foster system?
I was still in the foster. No, that was when just before.
Okay.
That was just for my birthday in 1943. I was 15. I started high school. I didn't know a word of English. I think I got 59 on my fourth term, my grade. Passing grade was 65. But that passed me anyways. The second term, I was reading Shakespeare. Midsummer Night's Dream. I made high school in 3.5 years, with honors.
With honors.
That put me in French 5, because that's where I learned most of my English. And I went on.
Our time is getting close to the end, and there's a few more things I'd like to ask you, Michel, and I think we'd like to see if our audience has a few questions. Tell us about your reunion with your parents and your siblings.
To the day that the war started in Belgium, May 10th, 1940, and 6 years later, May 10th, 1946, my parents landed in Philadelphia. After I left, my sister went to Palestine, followed her boyfriend, and my brother was to accompany him as a chaperone in a way. But he also went to Palestine. My mother bought more papers to get to Portugal and reunite with her husband. And I finally got their quota system approved and came here in 1946.
1946.
I went to Philadelphia sometime before the ship came, and waited and finally went to a movie where I saw Anna and the King of Siam. I remember that. And then I went to the ship, and I climbed on the ship, and
there were your
big
parents.
reunion.
What was that reunion like?
Heartwarming. It was wonderful. I recognized them. We had a big thing, and it's hard to describe.
A couple of other things I want to ask you. Because of your work with the museum reviewing documents pertaining to Belgium and Marseille, and through additional investigation that you've done over the years, you've learned about two horrible events that occurred just after you left, one in Brussels and one in Marseille. Right after you left, tell us about those.
In May 1940, after we left,
After you left.
on my birthday that same year, my neighborhood was completely wiped out of Jews. They went through it, the troops went through and picked up all the Jews, shipped them out to concentration camps. 1942, after we left Marseille, within, I think, a couple of months, that neighborhood where my friend lived,
Raphael?
Raphael, that neighborhood was completely blown up.
The Germans blew it up.
I think it was the Germans, with the help of the French. The French police, it was not the police, it was the security, and that picked up all the inhabitants there, and they went through a check line. Anybody who didn't have the proper documents was shipped out or executed.
And that was, again, right after you left, right?
That was right after I left.
My last question before we turn to our audience. Several years ago, after you were with us on a first-person program, in the audience was a local poet, Mrs. Davi Walders, and she wrote a poem after hearing you in this program. She wrote a poem that was a tribute to your mother, and she named it Lukshin. Lukshin. Tell us what's significant about the title of Lukshin.
Well, she was so impressed with that story, especially about my mother playing such a key role in all this, that she asked permission to write a poem. And Lukshin refers to the black market. Black marketing was also very important in selling dollar currency, American currency, that had very high value. And instead of calling it dollars, they called it Lukshin. And that was what saved us.
And she wrote that poem as a tribute.
She wrote that poem, which eventually came into a book about women of valor who were important.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I have it with me.
Wow. So let's do this. We have a little bit of time to turn to our audience and ask if you have some questions you'd like to ask Michel. We have microphones in each of the aisles, so we do ask that you go to the microphone to ask your question. If you would, and I see one brave soul already, go ahead to the mic if you don't mind. And I'm going to ask you to make your question as brief as you can. I'll try to do my best to repeat it so that we make sure we all hear it correctly before Michel responds to it. So please.
Did you ever think about changing your religion to get out of going through the Holocaust?
Question is, did you ever think about changing your religion to get out of what you're going through?
Well, I never thought much about religion in the first place. I had to be dragged to go to services on high holidays, and during my stay in Marseille, I never talked to anybody about my religion. And I never thought about that being a factor.
Do you think your mother may have thought about it at any point?
No.
Okay.
My father made a point of it when he came here, but I never thought about it.
Okay, thank you.
What was the hardest part that you had about escaping to America, and what was the?
What was the hardest part for you when you think about all you went through to escape and then to come to the United States? What was hardest for you?
That's a difficult question. The whole period, the whole experience was one long misery of sorts. I don't know if there was any. I think probably my scariest moment, I think, when facing the German troops on the train. That was about as bad as could be.
With your mother pretending to use sign language to communicate.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Incidentally, Michel has made a long list of all his close calls in life, and it's really remarkable, and that's certainly on that list. We'll take these two questions and then we'll close our program. And I ask you all to stay until the very end because Michel will talk to us for a couple moments at the end of the program.
Do you still have your French dictionary that you took with you?
Do you still have your French dictionary that you carried with you?
Actually, no. When I think my brother found it before I lost it.
Okay. Great question. Thank you. Yes.
What was your thought process coming into America?
What was your thought process coming to America? Yeah. So, what was your thoughts when you came to America? What was your reaction?
Well, I got acquainted with just cold cereals, which I never had before, with hot dogs, and I had new shoes. Huh?
Question
What was the thought process? What were you thinking? What were you feeling when you got here?
It was a new experience. I was trying to live it up and trying to enjoy it. After all, I could eat anything I wanted at this point if I could find it.
Was it just along those lines, though?
I wasn't worried anymore.
You weren't worried anymore? No. Okay, all right.
School was a new experience. Learning English, and my fifth language. I don't know.
Did you have worries that that the rest of your parents might not make it here, or were you pretty confident about that?
Oh, I was confident because I used to contact the Persian embassy all the time, and I pushed my cousins to get on it. You know, we had affidavits drawn in the 30s, in the mid-30s, so I pushed everybody.
You would, okay. And again, you're just a youngster doing
And I
that.
was, at 14 I had to make all the decisions about going to school and doing that and doing this. I had nothing else to do except survive.
I'm gonna turn back to Michel to close our program in a moment. I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remind you we'll have programs each Wednesday and Thursday until the middle of August. We hope you can come back. But all of our programs, including today's, will end up on the museum's YouTube page, so you can see our other programs, and we urge you to do that. When Michel finishes, our photographer, Joel, is going to come up on the stage, and he's going to take a picture of Michel with you as the background. So we want you here for that, because that's a nice memento for Michel. And then others may have questions that you didn't get to. We invite you, when Michel finishes, we invite you to come up on the stage. Please do that. Feel free to do that, to get your picture taken with Michel, say hi to him, ask him the question that's on your mind if you have one. So please know that we really do encourage you to do that. It's our tradition at First Person that our first person gets the last word. And so on that note, I turn to Michel to close our program.
And inasmuch as my memory doesn't help me too much anymore, I put it down on paper so I can read it. I came to this country in June 1943 when Europe was engulfed in a global conflagration just a couple of weeks before the invasion of Sicily. I also remember that just weeks later, a race riot blazed in Harlem. That was also the time when Jews were not really tolerated in America. Still, I recall my father 3 years later stepping off the ship, kneeling and kissing the ground, thus embracing America. He had waited at least 10 years before reaching his Shangri-La. Despite restrictive immigration laws, my whole family was ultimately reunited after long, bitter 13 years. Yet I also know that many Nazis were allowed here too. The Allies achieved victory. Concentration camps inmates were liberated and tried to return to their homes, though thousands of Jewish survivors could not consider themselves free. A great many were not welcome back, as they were robbed of lands and properties by their friendly neighbors, who in many cases had betrayed them. It took another 12 years to resettle these refugees. Although that was many distant years ago, yet it is still very much etched in my mind. And no matter how much we try, we cannot banish the misery, suffering, despair, deprivation, and hunger from our memory bank. We have made great strides and achieved much in our country since World War II, but the residual embers of discrimination, bigotry, intolerance, and hate have been smoldering and have actually been reignited by greedy, racist nationalists, political Neanderthals, such as those vile anti-Semites who strutted in a torch-lit parade in nearby Charlottesville last August, barking, Jews will not replace us. Today, the world stage is dreadfully reminiscent of the pre-war days of xenophobia and foreboding. While important partisan politicians are squabbling, regressive administrations are globally revising historical truth, while genocidal, racial, and ethnic conflicts have reawakened. Seemingly, the persevering media and a valiant young electorate are brave enough to come to the fore to be the real defenders of democracy today. I firmly believe that the adherence to the Constitution and the firm application of the separation of powers with love will in time realign our path. We must embrace and support diversity, education, and truth, for I believe that freedom cannot exist without real truth. In contrast to the politician, I am bound as a scientist to accept the truth as it smacks me in the face. God Bless America was composed by Irving Berlin, a Jew, an immigrant, a refugee from the Russian Empire, just like my father. That to me makes America truly great. This nation became a world leader mainly because of its moral values and innovative science and technology that you can embrace without fear. Keep learning about the issues troubling it and what truly makes your country great. Know your rights and use them judiciously, and most importantly, vote. But please, vote for the right people.